This Choircast podcast is brought to you by my book, Unless a Seed Falls to the Ground, Welcoming the Death of the Whiteness Gospel. I wrote this story as a plea for white Christian America to enter into a season of hospice spirituality to recover from the cancerous lie that we can start over, be in charge, and recover some original purity of Christianity. One friend calls it a love story to the church, the United States, and the entire human family. It's available now on Amazon.
The majority of our life is lived in liminal space.
And there's this in-between space, this liminal space.
This liminality that reveals possibility.
I think we're in a liminal moment, but also in a place of transformation. We could actually change as a people.
I have great affection for the church and a troubled relationship with it.
That can't be the gospel because God said to love our neighbors.
Just to be alive in time means that we're on the threshold of the future.
Just to begin questioning is so difficult because you have these voices in your ears telling you that you're not a real Christian.
We don't know what the future looks like. We have to work it out together.
Welcome to the Liminal Living podcast, where we have conversations with those who are going through dark nights or deconstruction. Dr. Andrew Bauman, welcome to the Liminal Living podcast. It is awesome to have you here on the show today.
I'm pumped. I'm pumped to be here. Thank you for having me. Glad to be a part.
I'm glad you're pumped. I'm pumped. I've been kind of following your work on Facebook for, 2 or 3 years now. So it's really cool to watch it develop into a book. And now, here we are. I was like, I'm going to have him on the show one day just because I want to. And then you wrote a book, and I'm like, well, there's a perfect opportunity right there.
Here we go. Yeah, I got a new book out, and excited to share about it.
So as of the recording here, which this one will drop next week on Wednesday, yesterday was your book release. How's that going?
Yeah. So it's good, man. People are excited about it. It feels needed. Unfortunately, I wish I didn't write this book in many ways. Basically, the title is Safe Church: How to Guard Against Sexism and Abuse in Christian Communities. And it's based on my dissertation research. So I've been working on this stuff for about 5 years now, and got information of over 2,800 women who worked in the church, and then in-depth interviews with women as well that worked in the church and their experience of sexism and abuse. And it's just illuminating, heartbreaking, humbling to know that I've been part of the problem, and I want to be part of the solution and be an ally to actually start becoming an advocate for women in the church, because I love the church and it's done a lot of harm.
Yeah, I can definitely see that for sure. So this is the result of a doctoral dissertation work. So this is all like peer reviewed. You've done your own research I hate to use the word do my own research, but you literally did the research on this. And so you're the expert.
Literally wrote the book on it. Yes, but I would argue that in many ways the women were the experts, and I basically felt like a scribe. I felt like this is in many ways not my story to tell. I feel like a guest in a sacred place where I needed to take off my shoes because it felt like holy ground. And so I think what I was surprised about, because of the sensitivity of the topic, was how willing these women, I would post something and it would be like I'd get 100 responses. Hey, I want to tell my story. I want to share with you I think because it felt like they had been silenced for so long, they've been gaslit of their experience, and just to be heard, specifically heard by a man, potentially even a white man, it just felt like it was healing for both of us to be a part of this process and to interview these women. And so I definitely, the expert in some ways, of course, and yet in other ways I felt like I was a bystander learning a new language and a new world that was very sad and heartbreaking.
Yeah. And really, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And
yes.
And so I'm glad you're putting this book out to help other people see it, for sure.
Yes.
Well, what kind of soil did your life grow up out of, and how did faith play a role in that?
Yeah. So I was actually a child of a pastor. So my father was a pastor, but he was also a secret sex addict and had a secret life. And so I cheated on my mom for numerous years. That kind of slowly came out and blew up my family when I was 8 years old. And kind of kept hush hush to protect the system that my father, he was a powerful evangelical leader in South Florida. And so they kind of kept it hush hush. My mom, was desperate to try to keep the family together and the image of a healthy Christian family, and kind of slowly that blew up with my father's spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, and lack of being faithful. And so my mom took my two siblings and myself to North Carolina, where her parents had retired, and that's where I ended up growing up. And so my mom kind of went numb, surviving her betrayal, and my father was a lawyer as well. Interesting combination. And so he just kind of pivoted and just practiced law and left ministry. And then I was left at 8 years old to try to make sense of this atomic bomb of my family, and didn't really know any of this. They tried to protect us from what was going on. So we just kind of left on vacation and didn't go back. And so that was that was kind of my origin of setting the stage. And then my mom kind of going numb from her own trauma, and I felt completely orphaned. I felt completely alone. And so that led me to my own journey of pornography use and pornography abuse, and my own addictions, and slowly, getting to college, and just finally caught up to me. Our stories always catch up to us. Our secrets always catch up to us. Our trauma always catches up to us. And so that was, found myself in a psych ward about 25 years ago, nearly taking my own life. And so I would say that was kind of the beginning for me of actually diving in to the depth of my heartache and the depth of my crucifixion, so that I could make sense and actually live a different story, and live a redemption story. So that was the beginning of me telling the truth, writing about it, facing my deepest shame, my deepest fear, and then ultimately discovering the depth of my purpose, that this is what I'm meant to do. And so after I became a pastor, and just didn't quite fit, the shoe didn't quite fit, and then after only a year, I went to study to become a therapist, and really began to kind of hone my voice of what does this path of justice look like? What does it mean to learn advocacy? That violence against women is a man's issue. That pornography abuse literally is destroying generations. And I began to learn a posture of kind of what does it mean to honor the other, to honor women, to no longer be a bystander to sexism, and actually begin to listen to women. And so that was, developed over the past 20 years of, wow, like we've got to do something. We've got to do something. And so in 2015, there was a study called The Elephant in the Valley, and it studied sexism in the tech industry in Silicon Valley. And so I read that study maybe in 2018, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this is what's happening with women in the tech world. Well, I wonder what's happening in another male-dominated space. 87% of men lead the Protestant church. I wonder what women's experience are in the church. And so that was where I developed the study, The Elephant in the Church, and where we got the 2,800 women and began to really collect data from their experience.
Well, it seems like an evangelical upbringing puts a lot of ideas in our head about God. Yes. And we have all the correct ideas, capital C, but then we have all of this evidence of sexism, abuse, and just narcissism, and all this other. When was a time when you really looked at the ideas in your head about God, and then your lived experience of your faith, and thought these two things are not matching up?
Yeah, I think it was in grad school, studying at the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology, and just really studying my own life and really digging in to my own style of relating, my own, how do I engage women? How do I, what is, like, just really deconstructing my faith, and then really seeing, whoa, I hadn't, as a pastor and growing up in Southern Baptist churches and just realizing, wow, I've been spoon-fed something that's mixed with, sprinkling a little Christian nationalism, sprinkling in some misogyny, sprinkling in the pornographic mindset, sprinkling, like I've been all these things, and then just realizing I drank the Kool-Aid. And it was told to me that it was God ordained. So if I deconstruct this, then I actually turn against God. Well, wait, I love God. Like I actually want to live a life that's pleasing to God. And yet are my politics, are my ideals so closely tied to my faith that I can't question? Well, that doesn't seem like the Jesus I know in the Bible, right? That doesn't sound like doubting Thomas, that literally says to Jesus right to his face, like, you're a liar. Show me your wounds. And Jesus isn't insecure like you and I are. And Jesus is like, yeah, here we go. Like, check it out. Feel my pain. Feel my wounds. And so I actually can question God. I'm glad God's not insecure. I can dig deep. I can use my brain to question and discover. And that led me on a path that feels like, yes, my faith is deepened. And yeah, I have far less answers than I used to have.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Like the dogmas that I've boiled down is basically just a few prayers that are from the church at large historically, and I'm like, these prayers are important. And then if someone asks me, well, what do you think about this? What do you believe about this and this? And it's like, I'm not sure, but all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. For there's a force of love moving through the universe that holds us fast and will never let us go. I know that's true. Like,
yes, right.
Yes. I'm holding on to prayers more than I am dogmas these days, just because I've seen the destruction that those dogmas have had on society and continue to have.
Yes. Totally. I remember hearing one thing in grad school, a professor said that stuck with me. He said, our theology should shed like snakeskin. And I was like, it's like flew in the face of everything I had learned, wait, what?
Say some more. That's good.
Yeah, like we should be shedding our theology like snakeskin and continuing to become. And I'm like, actually, yes, God is not something to be mastered. Even though, many of my buddies have a master of the theology, it's just like, it's not something to be mastered. Sorry. The more we study, the more we don't know. It's stepping into the wild mystery of God, and that's our place. And so the more you study, the less you know, if you're actually being honest.
So, like, your journey out of kind of this abusive, misogynistic, patriarchal evangelicalism, I'm sure I could put many more descriptors on there. Your journey out, like, can you identify some of the first dominoes that were just like, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense? Like, this is really easy to look back and say, wow, the whole thing was, a farce. But can you, like, maybe look at some of the dominoes or maybe some of the orders, or even just locate some dominoes and say, give us thought?
Yeah, I think it's when my life blew up, right? And so I had been going to church 3 times a week for 15 years. And, I went to this conservative Christian college, and my life was beginning to unravel. And so I could no longer pretend. And so my disguises didn't work anymore. And so I actually then kind of just started blowing up my life. And so, it's classic drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever. Like, it's that classic line. But then I was in this super strict evangelical college. So all these rules, right? And I hate rules. I'm a, Enneagram 8. I'm a challenger. So I think it was part of like trying to put in this, you weren't allowed to wear shorts in the building. You weren't allowed to wear, it was like all this stuff that was just like, so I kid you not, we had spiritual points. There was a spiritual point system. You got points if you went to church, and you got points if you went to chapel, right? So these things, so I'm like, that's where I'm at in my early 20s, right? Or whatever, 19, 20, early, this was before the psychiatric ward. And so I go from like I go into that world, public high school or whatever, and then I go into this weird world that I'm not like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a cult, this is, and I just was like, I have to rebel. So that was kind of where the beginning of like starting to like kind of blow up this structure of just like, oh, this is gross. And so I'm literally flunking out of all my classes. I move out into the woods. Okay. When I blow up my life, I go big. I move out into a tent into the woods. This is in East Tennessee, 20 something years ago. I move out and then I go to one class because he's a therapist and I really liked his class. Later it comes out that my Bible Old Testament professor is a cross-dresser on the weekends in Chattanooga. My Greek professor has an affair with his daughter's friend. It's like, oh, like it's coming, this is years later, like, oh, this type of system actually fosters a secret life. Right. But this one professor, he was different. He was authentic. He was funny. And so I'd literally come in stinking and, I'd just sit in the back just because I liked this one guy. And he took an interest in me and started going to see him and talk to him about my life. And he started speaking life to me in ways that nobody ever had. And so he ended up kind of taking me in and fathering me and mentoring me over the years. And he ended up leaving that institution and led a seminary program for years. And then my wife that's actually how I met my wife. She ended up going into his program for her grad education. And so that was kind of the beginning of like, this is not working. And then, if it wouldn't have been for him, I'd probably be in jail.
You just said something really interesting. Like one of your realizations was, oh, this system fosters the secret life. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. I think when we can no longer be human and authentic and we have to pretend, right? Our secrets is where our shame is. So wherever you don't talk about, like that's most likely where your shame is. And so where shame festers, it creates, it has to come out sideways somewhere. A lot of times it comes out in our sexuality because who you are sexually is a reflection of who you are in every arena of life, right? So we look through your sexuality to find out so many other areas of your life. And so that secret life, or these guys are, getting exposed because they have this secret sexuality get exposed. It comes out. It's like, oh, that's actually what's going on beneath, rather than, no, I'm just going to be authentically messy. I'm just going to be me. And I'm going to cuss and pray simultaneously, and I'm going to be really human. Oh, wait, I don't have to hide anymore. And I think that comes from my 13 years of being addicted to pornography and also being a youth pastor. Or also, it's like I lived with this duplicity, and my own father lived with the duplicity for so long. It made me, I smell it out a mile away. If somebody, pastor walks up to me and he's, glad handing politician, I just like literally will just like instantly vomit. It's just like I have this huge, because it's been my whole life. Like I know fakeness. I can smell it a mile away. I don't trust you. I don't trust you. I will not offer you my vulnerability in my heart. No. And that the ministry and the CEO model, the kind of top-down power model, has created this isolation where I almost feel like for me to support my family, if I'm a pastor, I have to be fake. I no longer can be authentic. And that's why I ultimately had to leave the ministry, because I felt like I could not actually live into my story in the fullness. I had to be fake, and it actually fostered my secret life.
That makes so much sense. Like that, I see that just across the board. Mm-hmm. When you look at how rigid the Liberty University was, and just how legalistic they were, and then you see what Jerry Falwell Jr., like everything come out about him. It's just kind of like he's just a mascot for what's going on across the board.
Yes.
And that You said something about like this, creates a shame system. And I'm wondering if the abuse system comes in to enforce the masks and the masquerade that we have to keep it covered up. And if we don't keep a handle on this, then it all blows out and everything comes out. Do you think like that might be one of the roots of what we're talking about?
There's so much interplay, right? And so when you look at, pastors in the church, Barna does some great research. And, I remember in one of their older studies in 2014, they said 50% of pastors had some type of relationship with porn. It's like, okay, so let's take just that as an example. So what are they going to do if they have a relationship with porn, right? Are they going to talk openly about their shame and their addiction? Probably not, right? And so what happens then? What is the outcome of that? And I feel like it's two ways. One, it's going to come out in talking a lot about modesty, right? Because I don't want to deal with my shame, I'm going to project it onto women. So I'm going to talk about what they wear. I'm going to leave the door open and not meet with them one-on-one because I want to project, no, I am good. I can't deal with this shame. So I'm going, look, I'm leave the door open when I meet with women. I preach about these things. Like I'm going to project it outward, right? Or the other extreme would be I become kind of seductive in my style of relating and seduce women. And, I'm either going to go to one extreme or the other. Or I have to face myself. I have to face my shame. I have to face that I'm a fraud. And that's too hard. I actually have to enter my crucifixion. I don't want to die. I don't want to feel that pain. I don't want to grieve my wounds that are actually I'm eroticizing and sexualizing. I don't want to face those wounds. I don't want to grieve. I don't want to feel pain. Okay, I'm just going to teach about modesty. I'm just going to literally live in a constant projection of my sexual shame.
That whole projection, yeah. Like I think you're getting at the roots of why the church has a chronic abuse problem, because like if I can sum up the spirituality that I was told, not necessarily like told, but taught, modeled to me, was do the best impersonation of who you think you want to be.
Bingo. Nailed it.
That's the spirituality I was taught to have.
Exactly.
And when you're done with that, when you're done doing that, it's just like, instead of trying to dump so much energy into projecting perfection, you can actually just work on being a good human.
Yes, exactly. And what does it actually mean to be authentic? Right? What does that actually mean? So as a pastor, I remember I was an honest man because I do have a big story, right? So it was drug, sex, Jesus saved me, and I could slay the house, right? So I loved teaching because it was just like, oh, Andrew, thank you for your testimony. And basically it was just like, I was theologically masturbating or what. I don't want to be crude, but it was just like, it was some type of just self-pleasuring of my testimony. And I got to grad school and we were in our group, first 101 group therapy class. And they were like, it's your turn to share your story. And I just, I got this. And I just went for it. Right. So I went for it. I'm going to slay this room. And then I look around, I did my thing and I look around and, kind of their jaws are kind of dropped. And the professor looks at me and he goes, "Where are you?" And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, I just brought my best stuff. Like, sex, drugs, Jesus. Like, tell me I'm good. And he's just like, basically, like, you're performing. Your story was so big, we actually couldn't enter it at all. And you did it on purpose. So we actually couldn't know you and see you and be with you. And realizing the grandeur of my story, my performance actually emotionally, relationally held people at arm's length because I was honest, but I was never vulnerable. Because I can trick you with my honesty. Oh, you're so great, Andrew. You've such a, what a strong testimony. But hell if I'm going to give you power to hurt me. So I'm going to be honest but not vulnerable. Because if I'm vulnerable, then I actually have to surrender. And then you have the power to actually do harm to me. And so there's a difference. And so the church is very well trained in a false sense of vulnerability.
Say more about that false sense of vulnerability.
Yeah, we're peddling honesty, and actually we're not actually filleting ourselves. We don't want to feel pain. And yet you have, millions of women whose bodies have been exploited, whose work has been exploited, who are, I think, are actually the victims of our lack of actually self-awareness, our lack of internal work, our lack of healing, right? And so, yeah, there's prices to pay for our underdeveloped lack of self-reflection, right? That's why, from my research, 82% of women said that sexism was in their church. It's like, what? 62% said they wouldn't be surprised if they heard a sexist joke in their church. Nearly 78% said their opportunities in career growth have been limited because of their gender. 35% said it was complicated or they had been sexually harassed. 35%. Where is that coming from? That's wild.
That brings me to the P word, patriarchy. And I think we've spiritualized this word into the abusive system that we see. And it just kind of then covers over the abuse because we have to maintain control so that we can manipulate and so that we can modify our power to run our own PR shows in front of everyone.
Bingo.
So talk about this patriarchy problem that we have.
Yeah. Well, so much of it is, I think, coming from this underdeveloped self and insecure masculinity. So if men are in charge, right, how do I remain in charge? And if I lose that power, then who am I? Right? So if we don't know who we are, then we lead from this insecure place and we do a lot of harm. Right? We do a lot of harm when you're in so many men that I work with in my therapy practice and our workshops are, insecure, abusive men who are literally just, their wives are begging for them to do some healing and some work because they don't even realize what they're doing. They don't even realize how our shadow parts of us that are unhealed are literally running the show, and we're hurting so many people in the process. And you look at major, evangelical leaders of the past, Mark Driscoll, Ravi Zacharias, and all these people of just like, what did Driscoll say? About under the bus or whatever. He's like, get out of my way. Bodies under the bus. It's just like, I was in Seattle at that time. And it's just like, okay, I'm literally counting all these people whose lives are destroyed because of this man. And he just goes, sets up shop, in Arizona. And, that's good. No problem here. And it's just like, all these people are traumatized because of your narcissism. Traumatized. And you don't give a crap. And it's so sad. It's so sad.
Do you think that, that whole evangelical construct that we're talking about, do you think that these strong, confident men that are very abusive, who are really secretly insecure, but those narcissistic, strong, confident, do you think that is a projection of our view of God? We think God is like these people, so therefore we idolize them. God is like Driscoll. God is like...
Yeah. Well, the projection of strength, there's a reason why people are drawn to narcissism. I want what they have. I want to be confident. I want to be strong. I don't want things to impact my heart, right? So there's this sense of kind of like flies to feces. It's like we're drawn to this and it's just toxic. It's sick. And yet once you actually get close enough, you realize how sick it is, how toxic it is. But on the outside, I want some of that. I don't want to be as insecure as I am. Jeez. I don't want to be as anxious and depressed as I am. Look how confident confident they are. And when you just realize later it's a mask, that's why narcissistic people actually don't have deep relationships. They just, once people actually get to know them, they're gone if they're healthy.
Yeah, that's the reason why the state, the pulpit,
correct,
it
exactly,
keeps that distance.
Exactly, and why the church specifically can be such a dangerous place.
Yeah, we can hide behind that. So confidence,
exactly,
and then everyone else is insecure. I wish I was like that person,
right?
And then that fosters the secret life. Gosh, what?
Exactly.
You wrote something about weaponizing forgiveness on Facebook. You wrote did you illustrate that cartoon? Because you're like putting these little cartoons out on your Facebook page that are really cool.
No, I didn't illustrate them. So they're from Her Church is an artist on Facebook that I really like. And so she has, I paid her to illustrate a bunch of concepts from the book.
Well, you talked about weaponizing forgiveness. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I write about 6 different ways that we weaponize forgiveness. Basically, pressuring a victim of abuse to forgive quickly without proper grief or repentance from the perpetrator for the pain that they inflicted. So I heard from so many women. Basically, they come in, they get counsel from their pastor, and their husband cheated on them, their husband looked at porn, their husband da-da-da-da-da, and the initial response is, well, have you forgiven him yet? Well, no, this happened yesterday, this happened last week, or this actually, no, he told me about it a month ago and said he'd never do it again, and then I walked in last night and he was doing it again. Like, it's the using forgiveness, right, as a weapon to get people to move on quickly. So 2, misquoting Bible verses on grace and forgiveness to manipulate the victim into spiritual bypassing, right? Bypassing abuse, bypassing the problem. Number 3, what weaponizing forgiveness is getting the victim to forgive the abuser is more important than actually sitting in the harm and the suffering that the abuser caused. Right? They want to make the problem yours, not theirs. And so in many ways, they can be a good pastor if they can get you to forgive rather than actually let's sit in this pain. Actually, I'm not going to provide answers. I'm just going to be present with it. And I'm going to confront the abuser and his lies and actually confront that. No, it's easier just to say, blame the victim, right, and re-traumatize them. And so number 4 is focus on doing, not feeling, checking off the box and doing what's supposedly right in front of others. Think of the Pharisees in Jesus's day, right? So in a sense, if you can check forgiveness off, well, I've forgiven him. Well, okay, like we're good. Let's move on, right? And so number 5 of weaponizing forgiveness is moving on. That's the highest priority. It's not about being present with the victim and their heartache. It's about getting over it as quickly as possible so I no longer feel obligated. Because what if me as a pastor can't fix it? Like, what if I can't fix this? Then I feel futile. Well, I don't want to deal with my feelings of futility, right? I want to feel powerful. So it's, again, back to us doing our own work and our own shadow work and doing that work so we don't have to constantly be projecting our futility. We actually can know who we are. And finally, weaponizing forgiveness. It's a lot of times it's getting others in the community to agree with them, to pressure the victim into moving on. So what I saw in my research is if the community, like, if they don't listen to me, maybe they'll listen to these people. And so all of a sudden you have as a victim of abuse that had been cheated on multiple times, you have all these voices telling her to forgive. Well, no, you can't leave your husband. So they go back, right? The average domestic violent woman leaves 7 or 8 times before they leave for good, right? So they're literally telling them to forgive, but they're not actually addressing the core problem of the abuse. So you're setting women up to be abused over and over and over again. Most of the abuse is emotional and spiritual, which is more covert than just, oh, I see a black eye on your face.
That sounds like this is a way of just quickly reestablishing status quo.
Exactly.
moving on, but then like hefting all of the weight of the whole situation on the shoulders of women. It's like your job to carry this. We just need to do the lip service, get everything back in order, and off we go.
Exactly. Yep. And then I'm so proud of myself, right? I'm good boy. Like I led them well, and actually you just participated in spiritual bypassing, and you actually didn't solve any problem. You actually didn't deal with it at all. You ran from it, because I believe you can't be spiritually healthy unless you're emotionally healthy. They're tied together. You can't be sexually healthy. You can't, like, they're all tied together, right? So sexual health, emotional health, spiritual health, they're all in sync. And so what you're actually doing in an effort to be spiritually healthy is you're actually doing something incredibly emotionally damaging to the woman, and actually enabling an abuser to continue to abuse, because you're not actually holding them accountable. You're not actually saying, what are you doing lying and cheating? Like, what are you doing? Well, I don't want to shame him. I hear that all the time. And they've then weaponized shame. Like, no, there's a difference between healthy shame and toxic shame, right? Toxic shame is saying the core of this person is evil, versus healthy shame is you need to feel the weight, the guilt of what you've done and stop doing it. This is not okay behavior. And we actually need to hold people accountable by saying, no, this is not okay. You are not entitled. And sadly, so many men live under the unconscious line that says, with great suffering comes great entitlement. And since I work all the time, since my wife won't have sex with me on demand, like porn, and she's not my porn star, then I'm entitled to go have sex with random women. I'm entitled to look at as much porn as I want. I'm entitled to, right? And I write a lot about that in my book, How Not to Be an Ass, becoming a good and safe man as well.
We're taking a quick break here mid-show to let you know of an opportunity that Choir is offering. Are you deconstructing your faith? It's tough, believe me, I know, I've done it. But what if you didn't have to do it alone? Imagine having guides like Jim Palmer, Kristen Dumais, Jennifer Knapp, Brad Jerzak, Brian Zahn, Paul Young, and more by your side to help. I know I would have loved that on my journey. Well, now you can. Head on over to choiracademy.com, link will be in the show notes, and register for their Square 2 class using the promo code LIMINAL, and you will get 10% off. This course and community are designed to help you navigate your journey with wisdom and support, all because you're a fan of the Liminal Living podcast. And now back to our show.
That whole, with great suffering comes great entitlement. Whoa, like I've not heard that, but now that you mentioned that, you just put words on something that I see over and over and over and over again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously that doesn't have to be the case, because great suffering can also produce great humility, right? So it's like, how do you actually steward your suffering on a larger scale, right? Like larger suffering. And yet on this smaller scale, so many times it's like, I feel it all the time. Oh, I worked so hard today. I'm just going to eat this tub of ice cream and watch Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I did really great work on my workshop. I'm going to go purchase 12 things on Amazon. So in those it's like, yeah, I feel entitled because look how much I just worked. Look how many men I just helped. Now I'm going to go eat this steak, 12 of them. So there's an indulgence there that comes from this entitlement, if I even suffer in a small way, right? So it's like, okay, I got to catch myself that I lie to myself all the time.
There's almost like we don't know how to calm the nervous system in a healthy way.
Right.
So we pick up, poor habits. And if I look back on a lot of my evangelical upbringing, I was like taught to have my nervous system on edge all the time.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
You have to be, alert, aware. The devil's like a roaring lion about to pounce on you, and you can't be tricked, and you can't trust your own heart thoughts, but then
your own intuition.
And then they don't give you any practices to regulate the nervous system, and it's just like just a repetitive cycle that is self-destructive.
Exactly. Rather than what we like to say is God is in your body. And so trusting your body is actually trusting the voice of God. Right? And
I
that's the
like that.
opposite. That's the opposite of what I heard growing up. You know, your
Mhm.
body is the master betrayal. It's just like, ugh. And then I work
Mhm.
with so many people and throughout sexual abuse, and it's just like, no, their relationship with their body is huge. Is huge. We've got to actually change their relationship with body and actually knowing God has called your body a temple. God lives in your body. Would God live in some place that's bad? Like we have to reclaim our body as our friend and bless where God lives.
But I thought that verse was just about not getting tattoos.
Which, yeah, I was. This past week, I had an interview, a national interview, and then somebody saw my tattoos on my arms and then commented on the. I read the comments, which I shouldn't have, but man, are just ripping me a new one. You'd go see that guy as a therapist? Look, he's got earrings and tattoos. Oh, what a joke of a therapist. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is dark, man.
Well, I think that we like outsource. Instead of listening to our bodies, we outsource that to the man behind the pulpit. And it's like,
Yes.
just tell me what to believe, tell me what to feel, tell me what to do.
Yep.
And then I don't have to do that. I don't have to have
Bingo.
any kind of authority or scary freedom.
Bingo. Exactly. And I don't have to
Yeah.
mess up. And when something does go wrong, I can blame you. Which is
That's
again,
happening.
yeah, Pastor, it's a
Yeah.
terrible job. It's like, yeah, everybody's gonna work out their daddy issues on you. Everybody's gonna like, you're a target, right? And so it's just like you're damned either way. And it's like,
Yeah.
yes, we don't want to
I
do our own
see
work.
that. Like, I'm a pastor, and um, I like run from guys that are immediately projecting something onto me. Like like you
I
said, I
bet.
just smell it. I'm just like, oh, this guy
Yep.
wants me to be
Yep.
this great thing up on the stage. I'm like,
Exactly.
no,
Yep.
we can't.
He's going to consume me, right? He's literally going to eat my flesh because he's so underdeveloped and he needs me to be something that I can never be. And the thing is when you get into that type of relationship, he's going to end up being so pissed at you because you're not going to be able to deliver. Right? So if you don't have healthy boundaries like you're describing and you do get in those relationships, it's like it's going to go poorly. I promise.
Every time.
Yep.
Every time. You wrote something that I wanted to read here because I think this line is really important today. You said, we must listen and believe those who have been historically marginalized, objectified, and subjugated to find out how we can do better, grow equity, equality, and truly treat people like the image bearers that they are. Mm-hmm. Why is this so hard for Christians when it's the heart of the whole message?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. And I think, I initially think of power. Why do we want to listen to people on the other side of power if we all want power? Right? And so it's like there's something there that we have put worth on the wrong place. So basically, if somebody has power, right, they have status. And so I want that. So I want to listen to them because I want that power and that status. Right? And yet Jesus was born in a freaking manger in a cave/barn thing. And it's just like he flew in the face of power systems. Jesus's relationship with women. I mean, literally, it's the exact opposite of the Roman patriarchal system at the time. His engagement in John 4 with the woman at the well. Just flying in the face of sexism, in the face of everything, in the Samaritan Jewish just breakdown. Like he literally, all the social strongholds and attitudes, like Jesus does the exact opposite, and he asked to share spit with this woman, which in Jewish tradition would literally be a one-way ticket to hell. It's wild. right? And Jesus' relationship with, the alabaster jar in Luke 7:36, the Canaanite woman, Mary Magdalene, like literally being the one he trusts the message of the resurrection to. Preach, woman, preach. Like, go tell the world. The gospel depends on you. I don't see that sexism. I don't see, I see Jesus literally going against the patriarchal norms of the time, which ends up getting him killed. And I think Jesus should be the guide of our church, right? I think Jesus should be the guide. And when we look at his relationship with women, it's very different than what we've been taught. Well, women can serve sandwiches at the luncheon for me because they can't teach.
We'll call them the directors instead of the pastors. They're the directors of
children ministry director.
Yeah. I noticed that we are pretty obsessed with our labels and things. Like,
yes.
I don't know if that was just good Christian marketing from the 80s and 90s or not, but it's like, right. Oh, that's a Christian whatever. So it's safe, it's good, it's approved. And then we get into like the underbelly of things. You're like, oh, yes. It's actually worse because it's just labeled, and I've been more like trying to look at something's essence. Like instead of just what's the label on the bottle, like what's actually in the bottle. That's what I'm really concerned about. But so many people are just concerned, with the label on the outside. And that's so true. There's the essence of something that is more important than how we label it.
Yes. So true. And it's so common. And that's why I feel so, I have another men's workshop starting tomorrow. We have every month we have men fly in from all over the world to do this deep healing work. And that's where my passion lies, of helping men heal so we can stop this. This is a men's work. We got to stop. We want to tell women, that to free themselves from their own objectification as we continue to objectify, as we continue to not do our own healing work. And it's just like, no, this is our work. This is our job. We can't be bystanders to sexism anymore. I remember years and years ago, I wrote a blog article on no longer being a bystander to sexism. And I'm walking in Seattle. We worked a lot with prostituted women, and I remember writing that article, and it was literally like a day or two passed, and I'm walking down the street, and a guy catcalls a woman, and I was like, crap, because I just remembered I wrote that article, and I was like, oh shoot, I can't be a bystander. I was like, well, what do I say? And this is all happening within seconds. I'm like, what do I say? And I said, she's a human, or something stupid. Like I didn't know what to say. And he just turns to me and said, you shut up, you mother beep beep. Started cussing me out. And then I just, shuffled away. But I was like so proud of myself that even in my non-articulate, I intercepted this moment of sexism. Like, don't treat her that way. I'm going to, okay, that's a little win. And it's something small. Did she hear? Probably not. But I stopped. I intercepted it. It's like, what if we all started doing that? What if we all stopped, making light of locker room talk and, jokes, and we call them jokes, and really they're not jokes at all. And so many women in my study reported that, of just like when they would confront. I remember one lady is a worship leader. Not a worship pastor. She was a worship leader, of course. And the all-male leadership was all together, and she kind of walked up, and they were joking about how to raise attendance in the church. And they said, we just need to do wet T-shirts for baptisms, and that'll increase attendance. And they all started laughing. And she's sitting there, and it's just like, as the only woman in the room, it's like, what did she feel towards her own body? What did she feel? And that, and so when women would confront the jokes, and I wrote a whole section about it, what they were told was just lighten up. It's just a joke. Stop being a prude. Right? One guy reflected back, this is a man's job, a man's world. You better get used to these jokes. That's sickening.
You said that that is another way to silence women's experience and continue a normative culture of objectification, all the while cursing women's sacred intuition in favor of insecure, male-centered sexism and abuse.
That's well written. You should read that book. That's good.
I just had to throw that one out there because you went to my next question without even me asking. That was awesome.
Yes.
You mentioned some really big stats. 82% of women say that sexism plays a role in church. And then you just said a whole bunch of other statistics, which is like, wow. Is it a bug in the system, or is it a function of the system that is created?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think it's pervasive. I think it's everywhere. It's part of the system. I mean, any time you get a part of a larger system, it's a difficult thing. And I'm reminded of Diane Lamberg's quote, where she says, she's talking about abuse in the church, and she says, people are sacred, created in the image of God. Systems are not. They are only worth the people in them and the people they serve. And the people are to be treated, whether one or many, the way Jesus Christ treated people. Understand that you cannot single-handedly change an entire system. You are not called to do so. Yet we are to speak truth to our systems. This is difficult to do and sometimes quite risky. Just ask Martin Luther King Jr. or ask Martin Luther himself. Ask those in the Me Too movement. When systems change, it is often little by little and usually at a great cost. Whew.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like I'm going to get annihilated for this book. Like, I already, just a few of the things from a couple trolls online on this one article. It's just like, I actually think I'm going to be a target. And maybe that actually is a good thing, that I'm striking a chord in insecure masculinity everywhere.
Well, it also sounds like you're doing good as well, not just stirring up trolls, but you're bearing some of the weight that women have been cursed to bear all by themselves.
Right.
And you're saying, guys, let's step up.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
Talking about systems, systems, we need to organize ourselves so that we know what's going on and who does what and the roles and all that kind of stuff. But it's so often the systems then become the masters.
Yes.
Like Jesus, when he was talking about, the Sabbath was created for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Yes.
Kind of a thing. So what, how is there a place where a system is just too big that it no longer is worth it? Do we need to have small systems? Can you talk a little bit about systems and how we should organize them better?
Yeah. I mean, the mega church, mega mall model, of church, I just don't think that's the best. I remember one of my favorite authors, Frederick Buechner, old Presbyterian minister, wrote like, man, maybe the churches should all burn down and we should just all do AA groups. And it's just like, I remember going to those, Al-Anon meetings to support, myself and my father's alcoholism, and just like, there's such beauty in the smallness of actually being vulnerable that you just can't do on a large scale, in a, Mickey D's model of church. It's just like, there is something that where the system really steals, and when we're literally just being entertained, it feels like it really steals from what we actually need, which is actually tending to our hearts. And so, obviously, if you grow a lot, and that's a problem. Like, how are you going to make it smaller? And so, I really appreciate the parish collective and the parish model of church. And, for 15 years in Seattle, we all lived in the same neighborhood and, served a certain population, and just did some radical stuff. And, it's kind of powerhouse of just small, 50 of us. And it's just like, and now as we moved away from Seattle after 15 years and now we're in a more conventional church system, it's just like, oh, this is strange. This is hard. This is hard to because the parish model and all being in the same neighborhood, Sunday service was just like a, this kind of side thing where during the week, every day living together in community at the park, all the time was church, all the time was ministry. We were living ministry, and that's such a different model.
I remember I was a part of a online, it was almost like a little conference, and Richard Rohr was kind of the speaker, and someone asked him, how do we do like this actual spiritual development in our churches? It just doesn't seem to be happening. And Richard Rohr's response is like always stuck with me. He's like, the best that you'll ever really be able to hope for is the sideshow. Like that's your spiritual development is always going to be the sideshow when there is a large system in play. And it was just like,
interesting.
I was just like kind of like relieved, like, okay, so maybe it's not just my problem that I can't seem to help people find this development, but it's just when we have a church system, it becomes about the money, it becomes about the power, it becomes about the authorities within it. And then those need involvement, it needs giving, it needs, all this, you got to feed the beast kind of a thing.
Right.
And then you only hope for the sideshow that maybe on the side we can help a few people here and there.
Exactly. Yes. And yet, like, what does that do to our own feelings of feeling important, right? It's like, if I'm only helping a few people, I want to help thousands. I want to be important. I want to be big, right? Like, it's back to that own inner development of, can you make peace with your inner world? Can you make peace with, okay, what's driving it? And I have to look at my shadow side all the time. It's like, okay, what's driving it? Like, what, I was writing about it the other day. I've been looking at other doctorate programs online. It's like, well, I'm going to go get a second doctorate? Like, what in the heck is going on? Well, realizing that, I've written 7 books. It's like, okay, like there's a shadow part of me that I'm still looking for affirmation from my dad. I'm still looking for affirmation. I still want my mom to be proud of me. I still, there's still, our depravity and our glory are always two sides of the same coin. They're always intertwined. And so I'm glad I'm doing this work. But I have to continue to be aware of the depravity in me and the shadow part of me, because then my work will suffer, and I'll be writing this stuff merely to stroke my own ego, rather than continuing to, no, actually, a lot of times I write actually out of my own survival. I need it for my own mental health, just to not go crazy. It's like, okay, like, I've got to just be aware. And part of what makes my work good is also, like, my darkness is always close there to say hello.
So I started this podcast 10 years ago when I got my doctorate. And I was like, I have to be this voice. I have to go and fix everything. I have to be the source of all. And it lasted for about 6 months, and just kind of like fizzled. And then I always wanted to reboot it. And it wasn't until I said, I have a lot more to learn. Who can I talk to help me learn, that it really started to take off again 2 years ago in April. And I was like, we're going to reboot it, but I'm not the expert. I'm the student now. Right. And as soon as I switched that role, it was just like, things just like freed up. And, I've got to talk to some of the most amazing people and learn so many different things. And that's
awesome.
I had to get my ego out of the driver's seat and just say, what, it's time to learn.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And in that's a place of, people learn. It's like, I remember starting my blog however many years ago, and it's just like, actually, I'm just going to, like, I need to make sense of what I'm seeing in the therapy room, and just start writing, and then people start connecting with it. And like, oh yeah, this makes someone, it's just like, oh wow. It's like, I'm literally just writing for myself and to make sense of chaos. But it's like, people connect to that when we actually are just being our true selves.
Yeah. Well, what practices have helped recenter your faith around something? Like, what are the things that you have, like, that you do either repetitively or just here and there? Like, what are those practices that really helped recenter you?
Yeah, I think the main one is writing. I try to write at least 2 or 3 days a week. So I'm writing regularly, and that's just keeping me honest, keeping me authentic. And I don't do it nearly as much, but just a meditation practice is what I long to continue to cultivate. And I realize when I'm at the edge internally, if I don't have that time to literally just sit, meditate. I've been writing a lot of music recently, and I wrote this one. It'll be produced coming up this year, but one that's called The Good Meditation, and basically it's very simple and kind of a chant. I am good, I am home, I am peace, I am known, and that's it. And just writing another song called My Body, My Friend, and trying to basically create some therapeutic music that can just help us reclaim our bodies and our peace, because I can run at a pretty high level of intensity, and I need to stop and listen.
Those sound really helpful. I appreciate that. Where do you want to send folks to connect with your work and buy your book?
Yeah. You can buy it, from, the powers that be, oligarchy, if you want to buy it on Amazon. You can also buy it, Target and Barnes and Noble. You can buy it straight from the publisher Baker as well. Safe Church, How to Guard Against Sexism and Abuse in Christian Communities. But check out our workshops and all of our offerings on www.christiancc.org. christiancc.org. We have a very, large practice that serves a lot of people, and we just do intensives. And then my blog is just on andrewjbauman.com. I blog regularly there.
Okay. Well, I will put those links in the show notes so people can just click on them and head right there and get them.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be with you and get to meet you.
It was great to finally connect and keep doing what you're doing. I think you're doing awesome work.
Yeah, thank you, man.